Well, good morning, everybody. As we start off this new week, our first map looks here at the next 10 days of the temperature pattern that we're expecting from the European model. And it's going to be a major change for those folks in New England, where over the weekend we saw temperatures struggle to get above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, on Mount Washington in New Hampshire, the tropopause actually got all the way down to touch the top of the mountain. So they had 120-mile-an-hour winds, and I believe set a new record in terms of lowest wind chill ever observed there. Well, the pattern's going over very mild, and that's important for Texas and to the Mid-South, where they're continuing to clean up after last week's, historic ice storm, which will likely be our second billion-dollar weather disaster this year, following the flooding in California. We will also talk in tonight's in-depth video about the balloon that came from China and how it traced out the flow of the atmosphere and was actually very well timed with high pressure, which promoted clear skies. We'll get into a quick discussion about that. We'll also look at a couple of other international weather events I think that are noteworthy. But again, this week, with a lack of a big ridge going into Alaska, because the ridge is closer to the Aleutian Islands, and no major ridging into Greenland, there's a lot of mild air that's going to flood across much of North America. But the only spot that stays cool here is in the Intermountain West. This same setup is what's going to deliver storm systems that kind of come through the northwest and then eject kind of out of the Four Corner states, but pretty far to the south, and then follow this path around a large subtropical ridge toward the Great Lakes. And so wherever you see the shading of green in through here, we're talking about areas that are going to see above average precipitation. There's a lot of benefits to this. The moisture that's returning over into parts of the western plains, southern plains, is desperately needed. But we are watching out for the risk of strong to severe storms this week in and throughout the states surrounding the lower Mississippi River Valley. And again, the concern here is there's a lot of flooding already happening in this area. But bigger picture, while this pattern avoids California in the near term, it is returning moisture to places that are going to need more of it. And that's just going to continue this ongoing story about how much of the fall 2022 drought is still evident when you get down deep into the soil profile, down around 40 inches or 100 centimeters. And this is all needing to be corrected in the coming months in order to ensure a better 2023 growing season. But down south, more flooding is hitting into these particular areas. Now, the big headline story I put in the report today is actually having to do with ocean temperatures and what they're showing about the changes in the trade winds, which are all linked to the fading of a La Nina. And so the warmer water surfacing here, the colder water fading in this area, is all symptomatic of this new pattern we're going into as we stretch out our longer range forecast into spring. So this is the latest update released on Sunday evening from the European model. I just kind of highlighted the precipitation anomalies on the left and temperature anomalies on the right as forecast by the model. This is going to have a high potential for failure. And the reason for that is the model was initialized when there was still a decent signal of La Nina. And but during this time period, March, April, and May, we're going to watch the La Nina fade very, very quickly. So this will be an ongoing discussion. We'll cover it again in tonight's in-depth report, but you can kind of see here labeled a few of the things I'm thinking about. The hardest part is going to be this. The newest update suggests that through February into March and April, those trade winds are going to back off enough to allow the warm water to come sloshing back. And that's going to put us in a whole new regime in terms of, atmospheric momentum and flow, which means that subseasonal factors like the MJO are going to take over. And as we finish one season and get ready to start another, it means that we're going to watch for a lot of variability in this weather pattern. But this is probably the most significant update I've got for you early this morning about the longer term. Now again, come back to the near term, and we got to watch the jet stream still entering the United States via the Pacific Northwest. So it did that last night, and you can see here going into this morning still some snow in through this area. But this is going to eventually kind of pull out here and link up, as we talked about last week, with this elongated pressure trough, starting with this low going with Hudson Bay. So it brings some showers tonight into tomorrow through parts of the upper Midwest, but stretch right down here into the Mid-South. And then that system is ends up feeding, if you notice it right here, on warm moisture that kind of comes around this ridge that's going to sit off of North Carolina's coast. So while the next system comes into the Pacific Northwest on Tuesday night, we're going to watch for another one to form right here, Tuesday night to Wednesday midday, that will follow that same trajectory. See how it just comes out of the Red River Valley of the South toward the Great Lakes. A couple of things to take note of here. We will be watching Wednesday night for the risk of strong to severe storms and a soaking rain to the north of it. There could be enough cold air on the back side of this. The placement of this is very challenging, but there could be enough cold air on the back side of this for snow and through parts of the Midwest and through here. That'll change a lot in the coming days. This is Thursday morning, but this will go right over parts of the Great Lakes, dragging its front from New England through the mid-Atlantic down into the southeast. But we're going to watch at that point the next system coming into the northwest, and just notice it dives down over the Four Corner States by next Sunday, and it ejects in the same spot. So you notice there's a lot of this action in the flow of the atmosphere. So taking you back to that second graphic, this is why we see the wetter conditions where we're expecting to see them. Another way to look at it here is who's going to be getting the best chance of snow. Well, much of the Cascades, Northern Rockies, of course, have high probability of picking up several inches, but this is not the kind of systems that deliver the big snows in these areas. We're going to see this region in through here being discussed more going into the Great Lakes as potentially grabbing some snow late this week. And then in the northern Canadian Prairie through parts of Ontario and Quebec, that's going to be the highest chances of seeing the heaviest snows, not in the mountains. Then from there, this is the chance of getting at least an inch of rain over the next 10 days, or an inch of total precipitation. Very high from eastern Texas and Oklahoma through much of the rest of the Mid-South, the Missouri Valley, and through this part of it into the Ohio and Mid-Mississippi Valley. So that's our wet corridor. Okay, from here, this will be a major topic in tonight's in-depth report. As we discussed a lot over the last couple of weeks, the MJO is going to leave Phase 3, quickly get through 4, 5, and possibly set up in Phase 7 initially and Phase 8 by the end of the month. And why I'm concerned about Phase 8 is this. If we get into MJO Phase 8, we could break down the Aleutian Ridge and the Southeast Ridge, temporarily allowing for better flow to come into the west. This is important for California. This is important for the plains. This is an important pattern to see set up that might possibly deliver a decent East Coast system. I'm just saying we're going to get there, but not for another 10 to 12 plus days. Let's watch out for this very carefully. From here, let's talk temperatures. I mean, it's hot for this time of year in Missouri. In fact, I got to drive through here tonight. I might have the windows down as I go through this area. But as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, you just see a lot of mild air across the United States, with the exception of what's going on throughout the Intermountain West. And even at that, the temperatures here are not, I wouldn't even call this unseasonable. We're used to this time of year. That's Thursday's highs. As we get into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, any chance that cooler air is fleeting across much of the eastern two-thirds of the United States. And again, to reinforce that first image I showed you, here's the next 15 days of temperature anomalies as a 5-day sliding window. Now, what I'm going to be watching is right about here, February 18th. Look at that, February 18th through the 21st. That's when I think the pattern could change because of the MJO's behavior. Give us a whole different look at the end of this month. It's speculative, but that's what I'll be watching. Okay, in today's report, I do include the new Week 3, Week 4 outlook, which could start to see that shift in the pattern that we just discussed. But it'll be a competition between that new change and if we can actually destroy the southeastern ridge, which is going to stay for the most part of the next 10 to 20 days over the southeast. From here, let's talk quickly about South America, because we are expecting very hot conditions throughout northern Argentina along the Paraná River later this week. This particular shading is over 40 degrees Celsius. That's 104 degrees Fahrenheit. But the models are attempting to return storms to this area late this upcoming weekend and early next week. We can see here, though, that central Brazil stays very, very wet. There's starting to become major concerns about the crop in this area due to flooding and what it's also doing to the infrastructure as harvest begins. And I put in the report the latest harvest updates on soybeans and also the safrinha corn planting progress, so take a look at that. Okay, I look forward to talking again tonight when we dig into this more. Until then, have a good rest of your day. Thanks.